All right, everyone, welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Stevens from Town of Wolcott PD in Connecticut, 46 years total in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Stevens.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, does time fly when you're having fun?
Yes,
46 years is a long time.
it sure does. It's hard to believe. People ask me how long I've, been in law enforcement, and then I'll say, "Well, how old are you?" And then I add another 20 years usually, or it's amazing how quick time went by.
Well, give us a little bit of background. What made you want to enter into this career, and what does your career look like so far?
Well, I'm sure you get this from many people. You want to help. That's the main thing. You want to see justice done when someone is, you have victims. You want to see justice. That's what sort of got me into. I'm going to say, I don't say later in life, but maybe I was a senior in high school. A little after that, when I got out of high school, that's when I decided I want to be in law enforcement, and I got a job with a security company, well, with a store catching shoplifters, and that's when it all started. Someone's doing something wrong. You want to stop that.
Yeah. And has it evolved a lot over the last 46 years, policing in general? Have you seen a lot of change?
Oh, it's changed immensely. You can't imagine how it's changed. I mean, we went from when I started, you would have a black or a nightstick. They had blackjacks. They had all types of tools. You didn't have any tasers or things like that. A lot of the if you had an unruly person or someone fighting with you, it was all hands on. It was not as safe as it is now with officers. We've gone, like I said, from a billy club or a nightstick where you're fighting with people to now a taser where you don't have to get that close contact. The technology through the years, we used to have flashlights, had 4D batteries, so they would last longer, you can see better. Now you have little tiny flashlights that are way better, brighter. It's just the technology throughout the years has really evolved. Again, right before I started, they didn't even have radios, or if you were in a car, you would have one radio and your partner wouldn't have a radio because you had one in the car. Now everyone has a radio, you take it home. Body cameras. I mean, the technology really, we gained a lot through technology in police work. That's the biggest change in it. There's laws people violate, we arrest them, or we try to, you know, community relations is big right now also. Well, it should have always been, we're working with the community. Uh, Everything has evolved from years ago. It's amazing in 46 years.
As you were saying that, a thought popped in my head, and I'm curious your opinion on this. We talk a lot about physical fitness and how there isn't really a standard outside of the academy, right? There isn't a continued physical fitness standard. And a lot of agencies are struggling with getting people to take action and to be physically fit. There's a lot of conversations about, should we mandate annual physical fitness tests? Should this be a part of what we do on a consistent basis? Do you think that because technology has evolved so much and you're not forced to hands-on fight as you used to, that has maybe reduced the perceived need for physical fitness because maybe you don't feel like you're gonna lose a fight, you have this technology to your advantage.
Well, no, that could be part of it. There are still standards, like you said, you have to pass to get into the academy. And
Mm.
I've always said, they do not check you after you're on a police job. You can now eat a dozen donuts every day and gain weight and have a bad heart. There's no incentive to stay in shape. However, with that being said, I remember one of the departments I worked with, they came in with sort of a physical fitness thing. It was a weight program.
Mhm.
So you would get supposed to get weighed, at the beginning of the year, then you could not only add so many pounds, or else I don't know what they would have done, put you on a diet, I don't know. But with that being said, years ago when I started, I mean, there was nothing to go into a donut shop and you're eating donuts and things like that. Now, like a lot of my guys, most of my guys, they have health shakes and they are physically fit. What we've done here at the Wolcott Police Department, which I'm sure a lot of other departments, we have a gym. The union asks if they can buy all the new equipment from. We have a very nice gym there where a lot of my members do go up there and use it. They do try to stay in shape. I don't think so much for the job, but more for their health and so their families are, they're around to take care of their families. Where years ago, That's when they had the heart and hypertension in Connecticut. I don't know if you're aware of that. If you got on the job, you were physically fit, your heart was okay, but you had high blood pressure, you would now be getting paid from the town because the job caused that. They
Mm.
did away with that a few years back, so you don't have that little heart and hypertension clause, that you can, if there's a problem, you gain weight or whatever. So now there's more of an incentive to stay in shape. And I do think, like I said, my guys, some of these guys are very physically fit. It's the majority of them are. So
Yeah.
myself, I'll go out being an old timer and I'll get that nice glazed donut. The other guys will want to have, something healthy. So there is a difference.
You're
But
making me hungry.
I don't know if they do that because, in case they have to fight with. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. But I think they all are more conscientious of being, in good shape nowadays to live a longer life, which is good.
Yeah. You said you saw a lot of evolution over the last 46 years. And this is, whenever I ask this question, it's a mixed bag. So I'm interested in your opinion. But do you think that it's harder today to be in law enforcement than it ever has been?
Yes. And what I mean by that is people rely on us more. Before you were a cop or a policeman, you would go out, someone breaks the laws, you arrest them. That's pretty much it. You take them, you bring them in, they get booked, and that's it. Nowadays, we are now, doctors, we're teachers, we're psychologists, we do all types of things now that we have to. I don't say required, but to get the job done properly. Not like in the old days. There are more things, there are more, I don't want to say rules, more policies we have to follow now. Again, when I started in the town I was in, it was a little small little handbook that was your policy and procedure manual. Now, they're on the computer. They're, hundreds of pages long, all the policies. So it is a little bit harder going and not going by all these policies, but have these. However, I think a lot of what is being done now makes our officers, especially in the state of Connecticut, better officers. They are now able, they're equipped, if someone has a mental health crisis, they should be able to help that person try to talk to them until a professional can, get in there. Uh, so I think with all these, I don't say restrictions, with the requirements and all, it does make a better officer out of you. Where years ago, broke the law, you grab them, you cuff them, you throw them in jail, and that's the end of it, whether they had issues or not. It was over.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, I can, and I've had this conversation a lot, but it's a lot to juggle, it's a lot to manage, it's a lot of pressure, to feel like you have to wear so many hats.
Well, a lot of the pressure comes from if you make an honest mistake or something goes wrong, you're now held liable for it. In the state of Connecticut, they changed the laws with qualified immunity and things like that. So you get a lot of the younger officers are more worried about if I do something, I make an honest mistake, that can quickly turn into, them being arrested, let alone losing their job. So I think a lot of more officers a little bit more hesitant to go out there and, grab everyone and do everything. We used to be, patrolmen where you're patrolling. Now we are in the, I mean, we still do patrol around. We want to prevent crimes, especially in the town of Wolcott, and we have a great relation with the community. But a lot of places, you're just a responder. You get a call, you respond to that call. You don't have as much going around looking for problems some places. My guys, they all want to do a job. I got a fantastic group of men and women here, and I will go out and say this right on the podcast. Logan has the best police department in the state of Connecticut. Okay. So, no,
I'm
but they,
I'm
they do.
gonna share that clip with every single chief that comes on here from Connecticut.
You can tell them Eddie Stevens said that. Okay. They all know me. But no, I mean, Connecticut is one of the most trained police agencies you have in the state of Connecticut in the whole country. The standards that are set by our police officer standards and training council are above everyone else, I think, except for Oregon. The what we learn, what we teach our recruits, it's unbelievable. What they're put through to become better officers. We have a lot more, requirements, regulations than any other state, like I said, other than Oregon. So you do have in the state of Connecticut the best trained officers, outside of maybe Oregon. I think we're neck and neck.
Yeah. I want to circle back to what you said earlier about, maybe officers having that hesitancy, and that's definitely not what we want, right? We want to build confidence and not fear. And so, I'm going to share that clip with everyone saying that you're the best. But it sounds like you guys are really trying to focus on how can you build the skill sets, but also build the confidence.
Right. I mean, if they're full, your officers are trained, they know what they have to do. And if, you instill that in them, no matter if you make an honest mistake, if you're following policies, you're following the law, nothing bad is going to happen. You did what you had to do. And again, a lot of officers, that's what they feel, and they do what they were trained for.
Yeah.
Uh, which is a good thing. You don't want to, I've heard rumblings, not through my department, but other departments, people, I don't want to say are afraid, they're still going to do the job. But, years ago where you're going to be, an aggressive officer, some of them really cannot be for fear of something bad happening. I mean, motor vehicle stops had declined in the state of Connecticut, and again, you hear a lot of people saying because of COVID, and that's why they're driving. I don't know if it's a lot to do with COVID or a lot to do with if I stop that car and I have a problem with someone in that car, and it turns into where there's gunfire or something like that, or you're going to look like you intentionally did it. That's I'm sure. I'm not saying every officer, no stretch of imagination. But I'm sure in the back of some officers' minds, that could be happening. But they still do go out and they still will do the job. There's no doubt about that. No matter, every day our officers in the state of Connecticut or all over the country, they get up in the morning or night if they're going in for the night shift. They put that vest on, they put that gun on. They're going into a job. There's no guarantees they're going to be coming back home. No guarantees. Yet they still do what they're required to do every day. Like I said, no matter the restrictions against us, they're still doing the jobs. But is that in the back of their mind? What if something bad happens, and I made an honest mistake? But hopefully, if they can show their training taught them to do what they did, they'll be okay. You see all the, people, the Monday morning quarterbacks, this should have happened, that should have happened. Again, a lot of the people that are saying this were never officers, were never in that position where, someone's pointing a gun on you and you don't know if you're going to shoot them. And if you do, what if that was a fake gun? What if that was a real gun? What if it was your life? All this stuff you have to think about in a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm curious, as a leader, how have you been able to evolve your mindset to, get on board with all of the changes and all of the things that you guys have to do now? Because you could have very easily been like, this is how we used to do it, this is how we're always going to do it. But it sounds to me like you're with the times and you've evolved with the times. How have you been able to do that?
Well, like I said, police work is ever changing. And to stay in this, like, as long as I have, you have to change with the times. You remember, we do work for the citizens in the state of Connecticut. We work for the citizens. The laws that we carry out are made by the legislatures. That's why we're here. If they decide to change something, and whether we like it or not, this is what we're supposed to do. This is what we're going to do. Let's get back to like the body cameras on there. It's mandated now, every officer, every cruiser has to have body cameras. But that's a good thing. In my mind, I was the first, the Wolcott Police Department in the state of Connecticut was the first department to have body cameras. I got them here in 2012. And the reason I had them here, some of my guys' little rumblings, but this was to protect my officers. When I get people coming in with false complaints or something, I don't really want to say false complaints, but something they perceived a different way. Now I had the video proof. Right away, I had people complaining about the officer's misconduct or whatever. Then I looked at the video camera and they were completely in the right. And I show this to the people complaining. They like with their jaws dropping. Uh, so that was something new that I adapted to that I thought was good. That's going to put us in the future. And lo and behold, again, every department has it. Cameras on buses. I had Smart Bus Live years ago, probably 2014. They were on the buses. They have since taken them off because they weren't getting much revenue in the state, town of Wolcott. But they're all going to that now. You have to stay with the times. I'll go to a lot of the chief shows, the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference, Connecticut Chiefs of Police Conference, where you're going to have vendors with all new things to help you run a department more efficiently, which is better. It's better not just for your officers, but it's better for the community. There's a company now that does all your policies online, your scheduling online. It's a lot easier. You're saving manpower, you're saving time, and it's all to benefit the citizens. Because money is not like, I don't want to say it wasn't like it was, but you have to be careful with what you're spending. You want to be a very efficient police department, but yet still get superior service out to your citizens. So if you don't, and I tell this to other guys, if you don't want to stay with the times, it's time to go.
Mhm.
It's time to go. So that's it makes it easier as you update. I mean, with the body cameras now, it's just so much easier. Things are so much easier for
Yeah.
officers because of technology.
How have you seen wellness evolve? Because that's something that I'm guessing was not a part of the conversation 46 years ago and now very much is. So, can you talk a little bit about your experience with the evolution of health and wellness?
Absolutely. There was no health and wellness. Can't eat a donut and get back to work. That's all it was. You can go on a very traumatic scene and that's it. Get back in the car and go take the next call. I was in the town right over next door to the city and they were very busy. You didn't have, I don't want to say you didn't have time. The supervisors were not aware of, wellness for officers. They were not aware. But a lot of officers that I knew struggled, whether it was, you had a high drinking rate, divorces, obesity. I mean, there were ways that people were coping that were not proper ways. They did not have the officer wellness that we have now. Connecticut, again, the state through the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association, we're very big. We'll bring in people to speak. We have like a conference every year to help officers and show different ways they can help themselves. And again, people that don't believe it, someone had told me once, if you break your arm, you can see that arm. You go to a hospital, they do an x-ray, they can see that. However, you break your mind or something's in your mind, you can't see that. There are no tests for that. There's no way to know what someone is suffering. Uh, again, years ago, suicide rates were very high amongst officers. I believe they dropped down. Not that they're gone, believe me, they're still there, but it's a very when people keep things bottled up, which is proven over the years, it's not good for them, it's not good for their family, not good for their health. So thankfully, again, in Connecticut, we have a big officer wellness program. In each department, we have a peer counselors here. If someone has an issue, we'll have our peer counselor talk to them, or from another town, I can call another chief and get one of their guys. Maybe my guy wouldn't want to talk to, their own guys. But we do have counseling available. Any major incident, we've had several. We had a triple homicide about 2 years ago. Officers are there. You got three people that are deceased, from gunshots. So I made sure right away we set up an appointment with all the officers there, to meet with counselors and go over it and see how they're feeling and their reaction. It's some people can shake off these traumatic incidents and not take them home or not realizing that they've seen something tragic until days or weeks or months later, So it's important that they do get the help. And again, here in Wolcott, in the state of Connecticut, most of your departments, if not all of the departments, will encourage an officer. I can't force you to do it. I'll give you the number. I'll make the calls for someone to help you. And also in the state of Connecticut now, because of our police accountability bill, we have to have the officers go through. They meet with a psychiatrist or psychologist that, like, I don't want to say a tune-up, but they'll talk to them, see if they have any issues and things like that. So, they do a good job here in the state.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like that was another one of those things as a leader having to adapt to the times and being like, hey, like we know how it
Yeah,
used to be, and now we have to make strides for something better, and to
totally.
make the lives of our people better. And I know a lot of leaders right now, and I've said this before, I give you guys a lot of credit for, having the ability to almost go against how you were raised. Like people taught you, suck it up, eat the donut, whatever, just keep going, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And, you've almost had to like untrain that to evolve to then better serve your team and your community.
Right. You have no choice. Again, you
Yeah.
progress. You had beat men and you had cars. You had one radio, two radio. You progress. And one thing is, my main concern here, and I have several, but my main concern as the chief of police is the health and well-being of my men and women that work for me. That's my number one concern. God forbid anything bad happen to any of them, and I have to make it, go see their wife or husband or you know what I mean. I would never want that, and that includes whether they have a broken leg or they're suffering from depression because of the job. I don't want to say they can't help the department anymore, but I bring them in. They're working for me. I'm responsible for my officers. Not just the officers, whether the dispatchers who go through a lot. They're taking the calls from people in need and crying and yelling and screaming and bad things happening to them. Everyone in this department, it's your job as a leader to get your people the help that they need. It's like I don't want to say they're like it's like a mechanic has his tools. He's going to take care of his tools to get the job done. In police work, the men and women that work for us are basically, they're doing the job for me. So I want to
Mhm.
make sure that my people are taken care of.
Yeah, I like that analogy. I think that's really cool. 46 years obviously is a long time to be in law enforcement. What do you think is the key to having a long and successful career and avoiding burnout?
I've thought about this many times. A lot of officers, you'll see men and women, they take the job home with them, and sometimes it's hard not to. It isn't, and it can cause problems in your home life and things like that. If you're a roofer, you go home and you're not up on the roof, you're not thinking about a roof, you're not, that's it. It's a job. You have to take this as a job. Uh, it's a way of making a life. It's not a life itself. You have your own life. You have your wife. You have your kids. I mean, I 46 years. I've only been married to one woman for 41 years. I mean, I don't bring a lot home. A lot of what happens, now my son's an officer. He's a detective in the next town over for 18 years. Well, he's been there 18 years. He learned, I don't say learn from me, but like my wife says, we don't go home and we don't discuss it. And, I try to separate myself from the job to my home life. There's two different lives there. I think when you do start bringing what happened, sometimes you're gonna might talk about it, but when you bring it home and you're reliving it and things going through your mind, that's not healthy for you. It's not healthy. So if you can separate it. Now, I don't want to say don't talk about it, but if you can separate, the reasons why people did things, I mean, we'll never figure out why people do the things they do. But, they did it. It's over. It's done. You did your job to the best of your ability. You have to keep those separate. Although it is very difficult at times. Like I said, you go into a scene, traumatic scene. I myself now, after seeing so many deceased people, when I go now, I do not, I don't want to look in their eyes or in their face. You know what I mean? That's my way of not dealing, of not having, I don't want to say nightmares, but things going through my mind and all like that. I'll try to avoid, looking at them if possible, at their facial features. That's, like I said, my way. Different people have different ways of coping. But again, if you go home, you try to keep that life separate than your police life, but you're still a cop 24/7.
Yeah, I had there was a sports psychologist and she works with law enforcement too, and she said you might not always be able to turn it completely off, but you have to have the ability to turn it down.
Yes,
And
that's perfect.
I really liked that, and I kind of thought of it as like a light bulb. Like
Mhm.
if that light switch is on 24/7, that light bulb is going to burn out, and it's going to burn out pretty quickly, right? If you leave that light on 24/7, 7 days a week. But if we can start to dim those lights a little bit or, try to turn it down, even if you can't turn it off, that light is going to last a lot longer, right? There's going to be more longevity and it's not going to burn out as quickly or maybe ever, depending on, how frequently you can kind of dim or shut that down or off. And so I really liked that a lot because, yeah, like, is it going to be a perfect system? Are there things that are going to pop up, when you're at home and you maybe think about something? Sure, humans, you might think of something, there might be something that's weighing on you, but we have to be able to feel like we are separate from what we do. Who we are is separate from what we do.
All right, right. I mean, I would say I wear a uniform every day. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I mean, we're still officers regardless. But yeah, again, you gave a perfect analogy with the light bulb. That's exactly what it is. That is exactly what it is. You can't, you see these guys living and breathing everything because in police work, I'm sure you heard this before, especially let's say a patrolman. You're going from you're having coffee or you're having a protein shake and you're sitting in a car listening to music, maybe writing a report or reading something. Then it goes into a three-car accident with injuries. And now your heart rate shoots right up and you're getting there and you're looking at something traumatic. Then, you get that taken care of. Now your heart rate goes back down and it's constant. It's constant. And it's hard to control that, but like you said, the mind, if you try not to think about it, if you're able to turn it down, you can't turn it off like you said, but if you're able to turn it down, it's gonna be better for you, because we all know we go through these days where you're going from one call to another to another. Some are barking dogs and some are, big fight. You have to slow things down, look at things, then when it's all over, you move on. But if it's over, if it's something traumatic, and what I tell anyone, if you're experiencing problems, you have a problem with it, let your supervisors know. Let your chief and let someone know, and they'll get you the help that they need, that you need. You
Yeah.
know, because again, we don't want no one hurting any officers, where they're sad, we don't want them hurting themselves. Bad family lives, we don't want any of that. We want productive people that are healthy, whether it's physical or mental.
Yeah, I appreciate the reminder that you don't have to do it alone, that there
Right.
are other people that you can reach out to, that you can speak to about these things. So if you do need help, that there are other people in your corner. So I appreciate that reminder. You already gave some really good advice, but I have to ask the final question for the younger generation. If you could leave one piece of advice or words of wisdom, what would they be?
This is a very fulfilling job. You're able to help people. You're able to keep bad people away from them. Uh, if you take this job, remember one thing. You should always do what's right. You do the right thing, and everyone knows what it is. You feel it in your heart, you know it in your brain. You want to be able to go home at night, put your head on the pillow, and say, I did the right thing. And I think that's going to last long because if you do wrong things and things you're not supposed to in police work, it's going to come back and get you. That's when, it's going to start playing on your mind and things like that. Always do the right thing. You should be able to sleep through the night when your head's on that pillow.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Stevens. I really appreciate you coming on here and spending a little bit of time with me
My
talking
pleasure.
about
Believe me, it's my pleasure.
Thank you.